And we're live.
Good evening, all. I hope you're having a fantastic time. It is Tuesday, the 29th of August, and I got a hot take for you. I think, and this is because I know at least half of our viewers personally, I think we have the highest skilled listeners of our live podcast out of every podcast that goes out to the Warhammer community. And that, I genuinely believe that. Because we get like 10 viewers, and I know like at least 6 of them are really good players. So, all of you who are tuned in right now, you're fucking fantastic. Living the dream.
They're
If
thinking, am I one of the good players or not?
you're not, you're on the
No,
podcast.
them.
If you're listening to this back, tune in next week on Tuesday the 5th, and I will say something nice about you as well. Well, for any of our audio listeners, I just blew a kiss at you in case you didn't see it. So, moving on. Hobby Roundup. I was going to say dear and also glorious leader. Clear leader.
Clear leader.
What have you been doing this week in your Hobby Roundup?
I have been doing absolutely nothing. I recently became obsessed with golf. I'm here to a sport, a real life sport. So
You've hit that age, have you?
I've hit that age where now all I want to do is just play golf.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of golf, but I have literally moments before this show done a bit of hobbying, and you'll all be delighted to hear that my Wraith Knight is fixed up now. He had a poorly fin, it got broken, and it's much better now. I can hear the boos ringing around.
That's me and Scrivo. We're just booing you.
Uh,
We'd never play Eldar. Never have. Never
no,
will.
exactly.
I sold my Eldar several years ago. It's fine.
Good lad.
Mine definitely aren't to the right of me.
So I have fixed my Wraith Knight all ready for the weekend because I'm going to EA Slam along with quite a few other members of the Plus, actually. And we're going to have a good time, hopefully. And I'm sure the Wraith Knight will do things.
Someone should do an ad for that, like a live reading, and just be like, EA Slam. It's in the hall, or whatever venue they have.
Hopefully.
We're way too small to be sued by EA, as petty and miserable as they are as a company. Lovely stuff. Well, before I get us into trouble through copyright infringement, Scrivo, how have you been? What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been getting some games in, but also a bit of hobby. So last week I finished off painting a repulsor because I'm cutting edge. I like to build and paint the things that everyone else built several years ago. And I'm just started building an exaction squad because they're totally fine. Nothing's going to happen to them. I have built them as a kill team, so it's fine because in kill team they're only average, so they're not going to be rubbish soon in both systems. They'll be just rubbish in one and really mediocre in the other one. So
how often do you play kill team, Scrivo?
Probably once a month, if that.
Okay, fair play. I thought it was going to be never. So
no, it's one of those things where, and I do have Orc Commandos that I've played to the point where I could just literally turn up and just play them and not have to think. And I've got the Necrons, which were my kind of gateway drug to buying Necrons as an army. So having these as a third different playstyle was kind of cool, but dual purpose as well for if I ever got my Imperial Knights out, which won't happen until they maybe get adjusted, but more on that later, maybe. You know?
We will be talking about that later.
I loop round.
I'm also just picturing you like crushing up resurrection orbs and snorting them as your gateway drug.
Yes. No, it's actually Hexmark Destroyers.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently 3 is the magic number to make you go, I want this army now.
Fair. Lovely. I have played my first game of 40k since Davy Slam, which I think was about 6 or 7 weeks ago. I played Chaos Knight War Dog Spam with Kyra's Fate Weaver, which is an incredibly fun army. And I played it into Tau with loads of railguns. And you know what? Had a great time. Went to round 5. We both had models left. We were 4 points apart. It was what 10th edition should be. Maybe we just ban, 4 armies and then everyone else has a good time. Chaos Knights would probably be banned as well, just because they can take the towering fuckers. But I didn't take them because I'm morally superior. Not at all because they're bad in Chaos Knights. That's got nothing to do with it. So, how are we doing on the content front, my man?
Slow, I think, is probably the word we'd use. We have, however, had the release of a very nice interview in which Ed interviewed Rob of Golden Ticket World Championship fame and glory. So those are the sorts of things that we said we're going to be releasing on our Patreon, but we wanted to put the first one out for free just so everyone could kind of sample the delights. So if you are in any shape or form interested in Drakari, I definitely recommend checking that out.
Or just winning events in general.
Yeah, it turns out he's got some tips. One of them being avoid Eldar, and then you'll be fine. But
well, no spoilers, no spoilers.
No, that's true. But no, he kind of talks in detail about his game plans, sorts of things. So it's yeah, it was really interesting. This, and I enjoyed editing it just because I enjoyed listening to the interview.
Yeah. Also, if you want to listen to two crusty fuckers reminisce about, Warhammer from being 8.
Yeah,
And
Ed
also,
manages to talk about himself quite a lot.
I'm not sure if you've noticed.
So...
I can't shut up at any point. Yeah,
if you want to hear about Rob and Ed, then check out that interview.
In my defense, we have known each other for quite a while now, and a lot of the stuff I was talking about was shared history. I will admit, not all of it. I think I probably mentioned when I started, but
Well, this one time, actually, I did this. And Rob's like, cool.
He's too polite to say anything because he's such a lovely guy.
But it was a really good interview, so definitely check that out. Shout out to our affiliates, Composite Games. So if you check out the description below, you'll see there is a link. If you go to that link, then you will get some lovely Warhammer products at a good price. Okay, so Composite Games are the same as all your standard retailers, but if you buy from them, we get a little bit of that money. And on top of that, if you use the code PLUS, which is also in the description below, then you'll get an additional 5% off. So, for example, those Tyranid lovers out there, I'm sure you might be fancying some pre-orders. So yeah, check that out. And then, of course, we have our Patreon, which is slowly getting up and running. So if you fancy checking that out, we've got some different tiers. And again, the link is in the description below. But yeah, in terms of upcoming content, we started talking about potentially doing tournament reports whilst we're there. Skari does them for his Drakari and that sort of thing. We've been talking about doing that. I think Lewis has volunteered to do one for LGT with his Tyranid Horde. Not only will he be trying to move 150 models in an hour and a half, but he'll also be filming it as he does it, like an absolute legend.
It's a good job that he's so in shape. He's a runner, is Lewis, and it pains me to say anything nice about him. But being in good physical shape is going to really help carrying both the camera, the content, the channel, and the models.
It'll be a harness, won't it? He'll have a harness on. He'll have magnetized trays. He'll have extra arms. It's going to be amazing. He's going to be a gene suit, basically.
I'm going to get to experience that tomorrow, actually, because I'm playing Lewis in Cambridge. I'm going to the Sons of War Club in Cambridge for the first time. I'm going to use my tournament Eldar list into his Tyranid. So we'll see if I can kill lots and lots of Gaunts.
I think the answer is yes. Yes, you can.
We'll find out. We'll find out. I've never actually played Lewis. I've never actually played him. So I think that'll be really cool. But yeah, we're still obviously got our eyes on various other pieces of content. And I've been making notes on a few different ideas I've got for new videos and that sort of thing. So watch this space.
Not this space. This is the podcast. Do watch this space. Continue watching this space. When we finish, go and watch another video on the channel. There's loads of them. They're great. We're great. We're beautiful. More kisses for you all. Lovely stuff. So, we've done all the positive stuff. I've tried to front load some real nice positivity because we're going to talk about things that we want to change, which you could look at positively, but it's not. It's some things are shit and we'd like them to change. So, room at random. Chris has just been speaking. Scrivo, do you want to tell me the one sort of general change, not an army specific thing, but what's the first general change you'd make to the rules? Because obviously we're due some balanced data slate changes coming up before LGT next couple of weeks, hopefully soon.
I would like to see some sort of consistent capping of devastating wounds. Sort of like how we did at the end of 9th, where a lot of the rules generally got FAQ'd or eventually got released as to the maximum of 6, and you kind of knew where you stood. It could spike, but it spiked to that 6, and it kind of felt like, cool, the whole game won't completely flip based on this one interaction. And it kind of feels, at the moment, like it can swing a little bit crazy on specific things, because some of them do have those sorts of caps built into them, but others don't. So it's a lot of haves and have-nots.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, we've kind of done the devastating wounds topic to death, but interestingly, that hasn't come up. That is a fresh take on it that we haven't had on the channel, as far as I've seen. I just think they should get rid of it, put it in the bin. It's a failed experiment. Devastating wounds needs to die. But I think that's probably more likely a way that they'll fix it.
Because they don't want to admit completely they've messed up, right? They'll go like, right, we overcooked it a little bit. Let's tone it down.
Yeah, because a lot of they've just printed a lot of physical physical paper rules, and then to less than 6 months later go, we're throwing half of it out. It's not a great look, and I can understand why they don't want to do that. So yeah, I like that suggestion. What are you thinking about devastating wounds, Chris, Mr. Wraith Knight?
I think when you've got such an important model that can abuse it, that's where the power comes from. So you just can't allow models like that to have those rules with such insane damage. If you've got something that can do what other armies are really making the most out of devastating wounds at the moment?
Deathwatch, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, not so much. It's, I would say, probably Imperial Knights. They have the Crusader who can spit out a reasonable number. Eldar are the obvious one.
Breaking the game, right? Yeah. And it's the fact that this Wraith Knight is on a resilient body and able to kill all the tanks, but also to kill all the big blobs of infantry because of devastating wounds. If you take devastating, I'm just spitballing here, but if you take devastating wounds away from the Wraith Knight, is devastating wounds a problem in the game anymore?
Eldar you'd have to fix all of the egregious vessels for Eldar, because I think if you get rid of the Wraith Knight, you play with just the D cannon. Because if you just spam 3 D cannons, even at the cost they're at now, I think that still covers you. I was playing without a Wraith Knight. Wraith Guard, they're really good. You put the character in that gives you effectively a free fate dice to get more.
So if we're assuming that Eldar get hit enough in other areas, that it's then not as potent. In terms of all other armies, is there anyone who's really...
I think right now that might solve the problem to the most part. The reason I'm not keen on it as a solution is we know and we see that they do just release things that are fundamentally broken. And I think if they leave devastating wounds as it is and not change it at a rules level, in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, there'll be something else that's really egregious that breaks the game because of devastating wounds. It's a rule like with the Votan, where you're auto wounding on 4s and you're getting rerolls. It's just something that fundamentally I believe shouldn't be in the game, because it limits the design space so much. You can't write rules that make sense, and then when it's inevitably too good, it gets nerfed, and then the rest of the book is just really boring in comparison because they've written something that's just really milquetoast.
Yeah, it's hard to balance, isn't it?
Yeah. So just get rid of it is what I'd say. But yeah, devastating wounds. Shocking none of you. We think devastating wounds should go. Chris, moving on. What would be your pick one of the?
So if I was wish listing, I would say I'd like them to fix fly. It's so. I mean, I play Harlequins, and Harlequins, I think actually would be quite an interesting army to play if it wasn't for the fact that your sort of your standard old builds of all the bikes and the boats and that sort of thing just does not work around terrain. So in that regard, if we're wish listing, I would like them to fix fly. I don't think they're going to do that. So more of a realistic prediction is that hopefully they will fix the kind of the generic rule around the hulls and the bases and those sorts of things.
Oh gosh.
Obviously, there's huge. I mean, it was so simple in ninth. It was the hull. Everything was from the hull. I mean, I'm still struggling to always remember what times am I measuring from the base, which times am I going from the hull, what happens when they charge me, what happens if I was to have to disembark outside of a wave serpent or like whatever? Like, there's just so many things going on here which they've, for some reason, and this has been a theme, hasn't it, across the rules, they've kind of just suddenly allowed stuff they weren't allowing before, and it's kind of taken a lot of us a while to go, wait, what you mean I can now deep strike in and fire and fade, or what, strike and fade, or whatever. All these sorts of things taking a while to get used to. And it's been like, why would you just suddenly allow that when it worked perfectly fine in ninth? And this was something that just seems a bit of a bizarre oversight. So I know Rob spoke to the rules writer, one of the rules writers at his event at Warhammer World, and was asked what would you change, and he said about the sort of the skimmer rules, and he said that yeah, we are actually looking at that. So that is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that that kind of just becomes very much cleared up. Maybe they've gone through every single skimmer and gone measure from the hull or the base, whatever's closest for everything, and then bosh, we're all happy again. But yeah, that is what I would quite like to see.
It's a good one. Makes sense to me. For me, I'm going to be boring. Like honorable mentions, you know, you've got all your usual stuff. Towering, obviously, please just fix it. It breaks the game. Games Workshop terrain formats are actually quite good, but you're never going to play them because Imperial Knights and Wraith Knights just fundamentally break them. Non-line of sight, dear God, stop. Has anyone played against the Imperial Guard mortar spam list yet?
No,
I haven't either, and I just like I'm already sad.
It's so
And I
it's
haven't
a
eaten.
miserable game. You either get
Yeah.
it or you just lose. And,
Yeah, it feels like a teams list because why would you play it when you could play literally anything else? Like, yeah, it's yeah.
We'll get Alex on it. Alex Chancellor, shout out to you. You can start building all of the indirect tanks for October.
Seems great. Seems like good fun for all the
Good
family.
time.
Yeah, I'm gonna say not controversial probably, but I hope they fix Custodes because as bad as melee is, even if you try and do some jank with melee and your list leans on melee, if you come up against a Custodes player, you're like, cool, go next.
Me first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's they own the fight phase in a way that's just not fun for anyone who has to play against them. And I haven't even played against them yet. And there are things you can do, and I'm sure down the line we'll put some content out. So, for example, I'm thinking about Chaos Knights at the moment. So if I come up against them and I've got 3 carnivores in my list, I will charge a carnivore at each end of the Big Ten block, and then I will put a stalker in the middle and just sacrifice that stalker so they can't pile in and hit me where I want. So they can put 2 models into each carnivore. Realistically, not even going to bracket them, and then I go ha and cleave through the unit. But that's committing a lot of resources. Yeah, and it relies on everything going right, which is easier for Chaos Knights to do because they can move through walls and yada yada. But it's very difficult for a melee army to do anything without just chumping out a load of models that are gonna pay dearly. Anyone played against Custodes?
I have.
Yeah. Really fun army. I wasn't playing a shooting army, so I didn't. Sorry, a melee army. I was playing a shooting army, so I didn't feel like it was that oppressive. It was just the normal Custodes problems of oh god, they're running at me. I don't have enough guns, and then dying. But it's you
you line up all your shots and you just go. I really hope they don't make a lot of 4-ups.
Yeah.
And
it had been a while since I'd played against them, so I did the thing where you go, cool, so here's priority 1, and I've lined up other things, and I need to really kill like 2 out of the 4 things that I'm going for, and then you shoot all your shots, and you're like, oh, I didn't kill any of the things. Oh no, now I'm in charge range. This is very bad for me. And then I lost on turn 2. It was yep, this is reminder how not to play against Custodes. I hate Custodes players who just run at you.
Bastards.
I love it when they sort of like feed out units and they're like, I'm going to play the slow scoring game because I've got really good primaries. No, when they just run 35 models at you, or even worse, run 20 models at you and then rapid ingress 15. You're like, oh, Anyway, so Custodes, that's my pick there. Cool. So we'll go with you first, Chris. Then let's go faction specific. Give me a really good faction in the game and some quick notes on what you'd change about it.
Okay, so there's this army called Eldar, and they've been doing quite well recently.
Have they?
Yeah, they're I think around the 75% win rate. They
I,
have,
I I could be wrong. I hear that they've got more wins now than Dark Elder had for the entirety of Ninth
you
Edition.
would
Is that
be correct.
correct?
Yeah, it is correct. They won. In fact, they won 10 out of 13 events at the weekend. Just
Oh dear.
so they're in quite a good place. So I would suggest they need to be probably toned down.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be such an interesting data slate in terms of what they do to Elder, because there's so many ways that this can be approached. My gut instinct is that if they get this wrong and they kind of miss the boat like they did in the previous one, yeah, they did make some minor changes and it's made like no difference at all.
I will say I'm not too upset at the limited scope of changes they made initially, because if they'd swung wide and gone too far, it'd feel really bad. And they did make changes that made a difference. It just didn't hit the top
The
armies
right things.
enough. Yeah.
So I think if they swing and they miss here, and now there are still kind of top three armies in the game, it's going to be like just huge outcry. So I think, therefore, that they will go over the top. They will try to go over the top. I think, from my perspective, it's really interesting. Like, how well do they know the factions? Like, quite often when they nerf things, it's almost like they're doing the things that they feel would be the right thing to do, rather than actually knowing what makes the armies tick when you play like with lots of reps of them. So if we go through like the general order things, obviously the Wraith Knight. The Wraith Knight is incredibly powerful because, as we mentioned earlier, it's good into everything. I'm not sure if points are the answer, because I think eventually you just get to a point where it's not takeable, and below that, you're just always taking it. So I would put the Wraith Knight up a little bit, but I would just remove the devastating wounds from the Wraith Knight.
No, you don't need to combo them. If Devastating Wounds goes from the Wraith Knight, it's not worth 475 points. Like, because what do? You kill two models really dead?
It's still quite good into those big blocks of elite infantry and tanks.
Is it?
Okay, yeah, because you've got the blast profile.
Yeah, that is true. But when you like factor saves in, and all of the big blocks of like elite infantry have a 4-up invuln now, I don't think it does very much. Someone in the chat, one of you beautiful people, do some maths for me on a brick of 10 shield guard or 10 custodian guard. Doesn't have to
If
be
you went
shield
10 to custodian guard, it would be 4, 6. It'd be 8 shots with guide. That's like 6 to 7 hits, and then wounding on 2s with the reroll. So you're killing, and then 2d6 damage. So you're probably killing 3 to 4 or 2 to 3.
Yeah.
If you have a gun, maybe killing a third or fourth.
You'd be very lucky too with a star cannon, I think. Yeah, maybe between the two of them. Yeah. I think you might be lucky to kill 3 is my gut feeling on that, but I haven't run the numbers.
But I would say that, yeah, if you just remove devastating wounds as the main priority, I think Invasion will still go up just because people will be
Oh, they
like,
definitely will do that. They just shouldn't, because if you take, I think if you take devastating wounds off it, it becomes unplayable immediately at 500 points or 475.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, I would take devastating wounds away from Reflect. So that's then hopefully the Reflect sorted. General points increases need to be targeted. There's absolutely no point in raising the points of stuff like Harlequin troops or Howling Banshees or Striking Scorpions or those sorts of things. In fact, they probably need to be reduced in cost. Whether I don't think it will be that far.
They won't make that mistake again. Unfortunately, you are right. But remember when that happened in 9th edition with Drakari? And then it just spawned more bullshit, and Drakari were dominant for another 4
They're not
months.
going to take any risks like that.
Yeah,
so
they won't do it. They'll just
they're
nerf
just
and then
trying
leave
to
it.
fix the main problems. So it will be points rises across all the important stuff. The only interesting thing for me will be whether they increase the second tier level of stuff. So, for example, Swooping Hawks. Right, you're starting to see them a bit more in lists. Dark Reapers, Dire Avengers, characters like Fugan, that sort of thing. Will they increase the points of those? Because that's the next tier of Eldar lists that are going to come about once they've hit. once warp spiders go up to 130 or whatever, like then it's going to be a lot trickier. So that's the interesting thing for me. Obviously, all the main stuff is just going to go up. By how much? I don't know. I would envisage, I don't know, probably 300 to 400 points lists going up by. So if we're playing around the 16 to 1700 points, the Incarn's going to be an interesting one. What do they change anything on the data sheet there, or do they just go points up to like 330, 350? Are you still taking her then?
I don't think it needs to go up. And just to loop back on what you were saying before about whether they know what they need to change, they have just solicited a load of feedback by the form of the job posting for Rules Writer, because the task that they asked everyone who went through to second round to do was to say, what are the top 3 and the bottom 3 armies, and what would you change about them? So obviously, they've got focused Eldar feedback.
Yeah.
I said I don't think you should change the avatar or the icon, because once all the stuff that kills things at range is like super inefficient, turns out that's not actually a good unit, or not an oppressive unit.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting. It's been in every list, so we would assume it's going to go up.
Sure.
So that'll be interesting. But yeah, as I said, the most interesting thing for me is will they hit the second tier of units, and then finally, obviously, Phantasm. Phantasm's incredibly powerful. Your instinctive first choice is we'll just make it 2 CP. That won't work at all, as we've discussed before, because everyone will still just use it because you've got your Way Leaper for your extra CP. So then you're thinking, well, what else could they do to it? They're not going to make it 3 CP, so they'll probably add some restriction, maybe once a battle, or you can only use it when an enemy's with a 9 or something like that. I would imagine would come about.
They made Mect a 4 CP strat in 8th edition, so watch this space.
I guess if it became 3 or 4, then it would probably become a once a battle strat. But yeah, those are the kind of the big things I would see here. As an Eldar player who that has been my main army for well over a year now, in various forms. Like, I hope they don't get absolutely smashed. I know most people want Eldar to be absolutely crushed, but I like to still play them. And if I was playing with around 16, 1700 points, then yeah, cool. I'm fine with that. We'll see how it goes. I'm actually looking forward to this because if assuming the Wraith Knight goes, then it will probably fit more my personal style of having lots of units and doing lots of janky stuff. So I'm actually looking forward to that. And list building will be more interesting again, rather than what shall I change up this time? Shall I have a Hornet or a unit of Shadow Spectres? So many decisions. But actually, hopefully, there'll be a bit more play, and you can use some of the other stuff that I've kind of experimented with in the early days. So, yeah, those are my Eldar thoughts.
Lovely. Scrivo, what are you thinking? Which faction would you change that's really good right now?
So mine's a bit different. Like there's the top 3 offenders. So I would actually be more concerned about Custodes, because they're kind of like being pushed down by those 3 offenders.
Yep.
But I don't really know what would need to be done. But it's just like, that was my thought when you said to me, like, which would you fix? It's like the obvious 3. If you fix them up, suddenly you get Custodes being a real problem across the board. But I don't have enough experience against them to know really what is the problem. But I just know that based on the current kind of thing, that if they go into something like Eldar and they don't actually succeed, they're just dunked back down. But at the moment, if they don't have to go into those sorts of matchups, they're just going to take out an event. Like I saw that at one of my little casual sort of events. 1,000 points, Aaron just dunked people because we didn't have an Eldar player with experience or with a Wraith Knight. So, and it showed, and I can just see, like, it's that age-old thing, like, you deal with one problem and everything else just shifts up. Like Chris was saying, if they don't kind of do something about the second tier of an army, it just means that the army kind of shifts and kind of people pivot. So I think it'd be the same with Custodes, that people will just suddenly just go, oh, I can buy 25 models to replace my Eldar army that I 3D printed. It's cool, I'll just do that instead. And it'll be a different problem for us.
Yeah. When I submitted my top 3 armies, Custodes was the third one I talked about, because I agree. I think especially because there's no way they don't deal with Titanic this time around.
They have
surely,
to, I think.
Surely, he says, coping out of his goddamn mind. But yeah, no, Custodes are a phenomenal army at the moment. I assume we might just see very similar to what happened to them in 9th edition when they were too good, which is a real shame because it makes them way less fun. But they just get a little bit of a points nerf, and then some of the stratagems go once per game, and you go, there we go. Now you're not a
Thank
problem
you.
because you don't have all
Yeah.
the tools that you had last time.
Yeah.
Sucks, but yeah, I don't know. If they rebalance them, I hope that they like reduce the points of Venetarian bikes, because
Yeah.
their fast units, which are squishy
Yeah.
like for the points, are just not good. So all people are playing right now are Wardens, who are real fucking hard to kill.
Yeah.
Custodian Guard, who are also fairly hard to kill because he chucks some like 4 shields in the unit or whatever. So yeah, there we go. There's my hot take for nerfing Custodies. Make the fast, squishy stuff cheaper, and then they'll die faster because people take those. Cool. Anything to add to that one, Chris? I know you've dabbled with Custodies.
Yeah, Custodies is one of my main armies, over 8th and 9th as well. I think for them it's just they can put too much board presence early on, and a lot of the armies just can't get through them quickly enough. So you want to have points up on certain units so that they can't flood the board as much. Okay, if they're losing like 4 or 5 models, I don't know, 3, 4 models. I'm not quite sure the right amount. But if they're losing that amount, then it'll probably make a big difference. Or you could do something like a unit cap. Rather than units of 10, you can only take units of 6, along with some points changes. That could work.
I think I'd like to see that, because MSU Custodies is a really fun play style. I just go at the end of 9th.
Yeah.
But nobody's running that. They're just running the big bricks because they're so hard to kill.
Yeah, I think there's stuff there. And then, like as you said, they just command the fight phase so well into anyone else who's trying to play that game. So just maybe the fight first strats and sort of things become once a battle, which is still powerful and can be game changing if you use it at the right moment. So, but yeah, I think they will get, when they released their meta watch, the top 3 were Custodes, Eldar, and GSC. So we're imagining that they are definitely looking at Custodes, but not quite as much because their win rate isn't actually that bad.
Yeah.
It's just
Because they just keep getting dunked down a notch,
Yeah.
unfortunately, by the others.
Quick shout out to Craig in chat. Thank you for paying me for your half of the Airbnb. I appreciate that. And thank you for not paying me through the YouTube channel, because Daddy YouTube would take a big cut. And then Daddy Chris would also take a big cut, as is his right. I'm not complaining about that. So if not to you, Craig, you did everything perfectly. If anyone owes me money, please send it direct to my bank account or my PayPal.
Super chat it in, please. Super chat it in.
Sponsor plug 2. If you owe me money. Perfect. So I was going to be the hipster fucking say Custodes. Now I've got to.
Damn it.
Wow.
I didn't say it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. As is your right. Hold on. Here's a hot take in the chat. Chicken Dinner says, I heard a weird rumor that scares me. Towering is going to 9th and mortal wounds will no longer overflow. That would be fine. That would be A-okay with me. That would fix both of those problems. Oh no! Knights players can be shot again from behind walls. Don't give a shit. Knight players don't care. They probably do, but like there's like 600 of them who are really fanatical about playing knights, and they will still play knights even if you make it so that they have to walk around terrain to see things. And nobody enjoys being shot by mortal wounds. If you say you do, stop. Get some help. So I guess I would say for me, probably it's got to be GSC, doesn't it? I know they're not as bad as they were, because
they're still very good though.
Because you can tech for them. I personally still think they're the best army in a non-teched environment. Having played against them with Eldar, they scare me. Like if you tech for them, sure you can beat them, but if you are just running like a pure start of 10th tournament list before you start putting in all the stuff that's really good against them, they terrify me. And I know that's a bit of like a man juggling 3 balls while unicycling with a hat on his head, but they are terrifying. So for me, GSC is put the points up across the board, limit the characters so you can't just have your all 3 bomb squads or wherever you want to put the rerolls. Because here's the thing, hitting on 5s sounds bad until you go, actually, we're hitting on 5s, we're exploding on 6s, we're getting +1 to hit, we're rerolling all our hits because of the character in there. Also, we're +1 to wound, and then suddenly those D6 +3 strength, like was it strength and 12 AP2 damage or something like that. Who knows? Who cares? They throw bombs. They hurt. They're very good. Also, the official FAQ changed it so when they respawn, they get their grenades back, their satchel charges, whatever the fuck they're called.
Because
Yeah,
a new
yeah.
iteration of the unit for whatever logical reason.
Games Workshop, stop. Get some help. Hire someone who knows what they're talking about. It doesn't have to be me. Just hire
Is that
anyone
what
who's
you
good.
wrote just on your application? Just get
No,
help, guys.
last time round I applied, I wrote like 14,000 words and I spent like 20 hours doing it. And this time around, I was like, I'm not doing that again. They didn't even respond to me. So I just recorded a 30-minute video because, yeah.
With
a
twice as
flag in
many
the
words.
Yeah. No, I'd had like 4 coffees, so I could squeeze 2 hours of
God.
content into. Yeah, put in the chat. Let's get some engagement. If you want me to put out some videos at 2 times speed because I've drank loads of coffee, let me know in the chat. I will do that. If not, you'll get only really fast talking. Give me a vote in the chat.
Patreon
Also,
only content. Okay.
yeah. Coming soon to an OnlyFans near you. Give
Oh.
us a like as well if you're in the chat. Really helps YouTube share us around and all that
For
good stuff.
the algorithms.
Yeah, I think if you said William Lovell says no thanks. Thank you for your feedback, Will. I will take that on board. You are valued and appreciated. GSE, what was I saying? Points go up a little bit. Characters go down to 1 of each. They did that in 9th. No one complained about it. It was fine. Change. Here's what I think they should change. Right now, the most boring units in GSE are the battle line units. It is the only army in the game I think you don't want to incentivize the battle line units for. So, get rid of battle line units come back. Push the other units. I want to see pure strains. I don't want to see pure strains because I've just got deep-seated residual trauma from being charged from like on turn 1 by Tyrannid Gene Stealers. But let's see more Gene Stealers. Let's see more small units of bikes. Let's see aberrants because they're just big chunky boys with sticks and they're lovely. Let's see all of those things instead of just here's my unit of 20 acolytes, here's my unit of 20 acolytes, here's my unit of 10 neophytes. I may have got those the wrong way around.
But yeah.
If I hadn't said anything, no one would have called me out because there are 30 Gene Stealer cult players in the world. But yeah, just let's not push that. Make them more expensive. Maybe leave aberrants and GSE, like the Gene Stealers, cheaper. Yeah, cut the points. Or I don't care. Just make it a different army. Make it not a gun army. Anyone want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've only played into them once, but I think into a lot of games or a lot of armies, that whole I've killed you, great. Oh, you've come back, and I have no way of stopping you, and you're here, and it's just an endless horde. And I get that that's really thematic, but unbelievably frustrating on the tabletop. So I think we're certainly at the top level seeing people start to learn how to play into GSC, tech for GSC. So obviously at the top levels, but if you've got those, you want it to, if we're looking for this fair and balanced game, then it's going to feel bad in the mid tables. So I guess approaching that kind of, tackling that kind of recycling in some way, even if it is just battle line units come back on a 3 up, 4 up, same as everything else. Just something, just so it's not quite as feel bad as I've killed this, because you then have to play around it, tag them, whittle them down, all those sorts of things. It just
take out some of the direct power. If you do that, then it's probably fine. Make it so that you can't get your shit pushed in by any 3-2 player. If it's just Mike Porter who's ruined my life, I can deal with that. He's probably gonna beat me, even if he's playing Death Guard. Maybe that's a bit of a push because he wouldn't leave his deployment zone. But in 9th edition, back into 9th edition, in this country, I reckon there were probably 10 people who I'd bump into at a singles event where I'd be like, oh, I've actually got to take this seriously because you're playing GSE. And the rest of them I'd just be like, oh, you really like GSE, do you? That's really cool. How long have you been playing them? 6 weeks? Sound. But yeah. Anything to add to that one, Scriver?
So to me, I think they need to at least be a coin flip for being brought back, because the fact that there is no risk to throwing your stuff forward, you wouldn't see an Orc army rules being kind of produced like that, because they're meant to be an endless horde as well, but you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't have it where it's a combat unit, so why do it with a shooting unit? And I still don't think the amount of re-rolls on units like that you can just freely get given out are quite right. Like the fact that you can literally go, oh, they hit on 5s, and then it just becomes completely undone just by a few, not even complicated combinations of things put to the unit. It's not like it's kind of
one strat and also put a HQ in the squad.
At that point, you're like, cool, you've just undone all the negatives of a unit, and there's no risk to throwing them forward. That doesn't feel like a fun game for anyone. So,
For anyone who
even
doesn't know the maths on it, just quick sidebar, I think it's going from hitting 1/3 of the time to hitting 5/6 of the time. It's like you're hitting on twos basically when you stack all of that on top of each other.
that doesn't feel nice.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Well, we've all become very sad. Just to round out before we move on to the bad armies and how we'd improve them, I genuinely think Games Workshop forgot that there isn't a rule that says if you roll a 1, it's an automatic fail. I think in their heads it's just, to be fair, in my head it was just like, okay, cool. So you on a 1 you fail, and then you on second reflection go back and look, you're like, hold on, shit. There's no rule in the book that just says if you roll a 1 it fails at all times, which probably should be a thing just to catch these edge cases.
It's an old rule that they took out when they took out all the erratas and tweaks from the last 2 editions of kind of
when the
development
went from this to this,
and then they're like, cool, we didn't need any of that 2 years worth of development. It's fine. Yeah. It's completely fine.
Yeah. Cool. Ban Eldar. At this point, like, I know I was against it at the start of the edition, but like, if they don't fix them, like, fuck it. I don't want to play against them. I've not been going to events because I don't have to play against them. So, if that's what it takes, fuck it. I'll come to the dark side with you, Asante. All right. So something a bit more positive this time. I believe we started with Chris last time. So Scrivo, give me your bad army that you'd like to improve and how you'd improve it.
So mine's not quite a bad army. It's an army that when they rewrote it, it's almost like they wrote it to not be the army that they are, which is orcs. Because they kind of wrote them in a way that they're meant to be this kind of chaotic army full of lots of randomness that should run at you and hurt you when they hit you. They now play like Drakari used to play, where you just throw them forward, you put them in transports, you get out, you tie stuff up, you score stuff. That's not orcs. Like, you want to be hurting things, and it just feels very kind of like one-dimensional in a different way, rather than it being... It's like playing the game and then going, right, combat doesn't exist for you as an army, when that's meant to be, realistically, orcs' shtick. Like, and then I look at that as an army that I've got quite a depth of, and I just don't have an interest in kind of going, okay, I'll recalibrate what I've got as an army, put it all in trucks, and then play Drakari. It's just like it feels a shame to me. Whilst a few simple changes I think could really kind of help. So to me, a lot of the biggest problems I have with it is that orcs, for their combat, unless you're using some of the snagger stuff, you're not hitting anything that's toughness higher than like 5 or 6, like accurately, consistently, and that feels a shame. Like, you have to really kind of go into the beast snagger stuff, which, funnily enough, new toys, right? Sure. Oddly, they've made them the better thing, but even them, like beast snagger boys, you throw them into something like a dreadnought, they're all right, but they're not going to definitely kill it. It's just still quite swingy, and it's just, that's frustrating as a game where your entire shtick is you're supposed to get out of the truck, hurt it, and then keep going. And it feels a shame. So I think if they really kind of recalibrated some of the killiness, but not over egg it. I don't want it to have to be like the beast boss on Squigosaur in 9th by the end of it, where you couldn't kill it. It just ate whatever it wants, because that equally wasn't fun. Because
I loved it.
I did, but I didn't. I can see why it wouldn't be fun to go against. It's like the Custody blob or the Deathwing Knights blob, where you just go, okay, I can't deal with that. That's not very fun. Like, there should be a risk still. So I think giving people a bit more, like, to me, like things like the buggies, you look at buggies now. Has anyone seen a buggy on the table?
That's what I was going to say. Like, how the fuck have they gone, hey, 10th edition, melee's not very good, but don't worry, you've got guns, you're doing pretty good. And buggies are bad. How the fuck have they managed that?
That was the first thing I looked at in the index. I was like, cool, maybe I can get my buggies out, because I really like my speed freaks. My original orc army was all in trucks. It was all boys, burner boys, bikes. I looked at it and went, this is awful. I just was like, I can't play this as an army. And it felt a real shame. But what this does give me hope, though, is we've already seen some previews of the Tyranid detachments. The fact they're going down the archetypes. Maybe we'll see a buggy kind of scope to it. It feels like an actual thing, right?
it was always going to be the case that all archetypes are going to be back, whether they're fleshed out well. But are orcs on the list of getting a codex soon? It's been so long since it's been teased.
I think they're one of the later ones, which is why at the beginning of the announcements I was like, right, I'll shelve my orcs because I don't want to just kind of play Index Hammer with them for a year or two, because I did that at the beginning of 8th and it was tough.
Yeah,
so
I'm just pulling up the rules now because I had a very similar experience to you. And I was like, yeah, I'm really, really keen to play some orcs. I love me some mech orcs. When I got into them in 8th edition, I was like, I really want to play like a Killer Can and Dread Army. And then the buggy rules came out. I was like, hey, these are just like dreadnoughts with wheels. They've got actual combat. They've got guns. I'm having a great time. They're a bit faster. I'm pretty sure that I looked at because the rules came out before the points did, and I'm trying to find the. Why can't I find data sheets? There we go. It's because I'm trying to talk and also click things. But I'm pretty sure when they came out, I looked at the killer cans and I was like, these things look really good. And then I looked at the points, and they're 50 points each. But I think that's more expensive than they were in 9th edition. So they kind of I was like, nah, I'm not feeling it. Yeah.
So there's some bits like the killer cans that you've started seeing them appearing in lists, and they're great, but they are a one and done unit. You drop down, it kills something, and then it falls over, and it's just like that doesn't feel too orky, especially because it's grots.
And I don't think they're good enough to make it worth taking when each one is 2 points for bring it down.
Yeah, people just go fixed into you, don't they? And then you're just hemorrhaging points.
Yeah, which maybe if we get a meta where all the top armies are only playing tactical, and you're like, hey, I can play this because if you want to take fixed, weirdly, you're going to get less points by getting like a certain 20 and then like a 10 instead of just the full 100 points that you'd get otherwise. But that's wish listing a little bit. Anything to add, my war boss?
I mean, orcs is an army I don't really know particularly well, but what I will say is that I know Aaron, when he played his orcs at the start of the edition, said they just weren't fun. They just didn't feel like what you had to do to be successful with the army didn't feel like an orky. It wasn't in keeping with the army. So that would be nice to change. But what I will say is orcs, in the same way that WTC, the World Team Championship, in the same way that GST underperformed,
they overperformed,
Orcs were the army that actually did much better than people were thinking. So I think in terms of if you take the right things and you play it in the right way, I think they can be a pretty strong army into a lot of the armies out there. It's just that that's not really what orc players want to do. So therefore, we're not seeing it.
Yeah, so Scriver, you were saying, and obviously you were at WTC, so you have the experience here to comment on it, but you were saying that they played like last edition's Drakari. By that, do you mean that you play to basically dominate the primary through jank, as opposed to like killing your opponents off it?
Yeah, completely. So it's fast-moving transports going forward, and then it's just like you can't deal with it quick enough, because 5 or 6 trucks being flung forward, and then back objective, you've got grots on it. You can go swing out grots 20-odd inches with super grots, with the run herd. What's his name? Zogrot. It's just like there was all those sort of things to deal with. And then at the same time, you do have things like flash kits, which aren't too bad at shooting. They're not anywhere like the level of like Eldar shooting or even Space Marine shooting, but it's a surprise if you're not used to it. And I think that caught a lot of people out, that there is still quite a lot of a carpet to them, in the same sort of way that when you first played against GNC the Colts, because you deal with the vehicles, great, all your shooting's gone into the vehicles, and then out of each vehicle comes 10, 20 models, depending on what vehicle, and you can't deal with that quick enough, right? Whilst they're scoring points, doing secondaries, you're trying to just focus on those things, not actually doing your own secondaries as well. Whilst on a clock as well. That was the thing I saw at WCC, was a lot of players were very much kind of being pressured into a very, very long game. So our last round against, Luxembourg, their Thousand Suns player was very stressed out by the fact that he was having to battle with tons and tons of orcs when he only had like 40 models.
I do like an army that makes my opponents have to make repeated difficult decisions.
Yeah, and then makes them make bad decisions as well, because they're kind of panicking which is it's fascinating, but that's not how I want to play orcs. I just want to throw
No.
things forward and just cackle as my bubble chucker randomly blows something up just because I happen to roll the right number whilst blowing bubbles at you.
I will say I'm not sad that the randomness is toned down. I know
Yeah.
that's typically an orky thing, and it has been for years. And I had the 5th edition Orc Codex, where if you rolled a double 6, you'd drop a vortex template on whatever you shot.
Yeah.
That's the aspect of orcs that I never liked personally.
It needs to be kind of a nice reward if you do gamble, not punished for 60% of the time.
Yeah,
that's the
balance.
balance.
And then like 5% of the time, you're like, oh shit, I win the game. Cool.
Yeah.
This is neat. Lovely. Well, Chris, what would be your underpowered faction that you'd like to improve?
So I was just like looking at the bottom on stat checks, kind of like the bottom 3 at the moment, and we've got Leagues of Votan, Death Guard, and Grey Knights. Now, obviously, in our team we have the Votan main himself, Tom. So Twin Leagues will offer some insights up for that. But actually, Grey Knights. So Grey Knights are sitting at 36% win rate.
Yeah.
Grey Knights have a lot of really good tools. They've got some really good stratagems, some great inbuilt rules, and that sort of thing. The fact is that they're just overcosted, and I think that watch this space. But if Grey Knights get enough of a points kind of decrease, I would definitely could see that becoming a build. I actually watched a battle report today between Jack Harpster's kind of like 30 Terminator build and Quentin Johnson's War Master's 3rd place Eldari build, and Jack won by 3 points.
I was gonna say, yeah, like I haven't watched him talk about it, but I was having a look at the WTC event list, and didn't he do very well with basically 3 units?
Yeah, it's essentially 2 units of 10 Terminators, a unit of 10 Paladins, Calidus Assassin, and then a few characters. And those are basically the list. But it's got a rough matchup into GSC, but other than that, it's actually he was able to win or draw or have a really narrow loss into everyone. In the end, he beat the Eldar because think about a lot of the cards don't score well against them, and try and then at a point where you do finally corner them, they just pick themselves up and go away and that sort of thing. I think you're not seeing those sorts of builds, and it also takes a really high skilled player to use them effectively. So I think a combination of the fact that those two things, that you have to build in a particular way and you have to be a really high skilled player, I think is obviously holding them back. But I think if they get some points changes, then actually you might start to see more of these builds, and I think they could be I think they could be really good. I think they could be quite good fun.
I need to have a look in a cupboard because I think I might have 25 Grey Knight Terminators built, unpainted. I don't think I've got enough time. Or
I've only got 15. I can only lend you 15.
Yeah, I don't think I've got enough time and enthusiasm to learn them to a high enough level to take to LGT. Yeah. But
I feel like
think about.
I feel like a lot of the players that would normally lean into that playstyle already have the army are probably playing Thousand Suns at the moment because it's kind of doing a similar thing but in a slightly sweeter spot.
Yeah.
Got more output, right? The issue with the Grey Knights is that unless you can get them into combat, then they're just not hugely killy, especially like the Dread Knights don't do anything anymore. No. So I think, that's you have to be playing in the army because you love the movement jank rather than blowing your opponent away or smashing face in combat and those sorts of things.
I want to say just I'm feeling vindicated. Pull up the clip, Jamie. Early in the edition, I was saying Thousand Suns are going to be mega, and then nobody did anything with them for ages, and now people are doing stuff with them. I'm like, yeah, I knew, and by that I mean I looked at the data sheets and the rules, and I was like, oh, these seem solid. That was my my.
They're cool army as well.
Yeah, they are. I just wish I had them. I did buy some once and then had to pretty much immediately sell them because I had no space to store them and no time to play them. I didn't have to sell them.
But Tom's just picked them up, hasn't he? Which is surprising for a Votan main that he's could dabble with his Thousand Suns as well. So,
yeah, I think he's looking for an army that's a bit more competitively viable than Votan because I don't think any of the armies he's got are particularly worth taking to tournaments at the moment. You've got Votan,
or it's Gene Stealers, and then he doesn't want to do that for the other extreme, right? As it currently stands.
That was the joke.
All right, sorry.
It's all right. It wasn't a good joke, so
Well, next time, just like hold up a sign or something, like saying "joke
Fucking hell.
incoming" for me.
You're the second person in 2 days that's informed me I have to put the sarcasm hat on. At this point, I think I might
Sorry.
have to. No, it's absolutely fine. I think at this point I might actually have to get a hat that says sarcasm on it. Which
Just
about it.
tattooed across your forehead because it's a
wouldn't
constant,
it
right?
wouldn't be the first time I got a hat printed. Hold on, is that no? I got a hat printed in ninth edition after they nerfed buggies and flyers so that you could only have one unit of each buggy, and I got a green hat that said "Make Orcs Good Again" or something on it.
Oh,
Yeah, and yeah, great times.
Still waiting.
Salty about that. Yeah. Cool. What army would I pick then? I was going to say Grey Knights because they're the fun one.
yeah.
I can tell you what I wouldn't fix. Not easily. Not within an FAQ. Death Guard. They're so dog shit. Like they need a fundamental rewrite from the ground up. Let's just talk about Death Guard then, because Death Guard's army rule, the Contagion, which is -1 toughness within 3, 6, 9 inches from turns 1, 2, 3 onwards. Why'd you fucking bother? Two things. First of all, we've had incredible toughness creep in this game, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a problem. However, this rule hasn't been increased to match it. You could have gone -1, -2, -3 toughness. That comes with its own issues, where suddenly you're wounding Space Marines on 2s with your bolt guns. So, you know,
could have made it tied to monsters and vehicles.
yeah. But here's the thing. You shouldn't have made it anything to do with fucking toughness in the first place, as I'm going to touch on, because the second problem is you gave every single weapon. I haven't double checked because looking at that fucking index makes my eyes hurt and my heart bleed. But every single weapon, disclaimer, maybe there's 2 that aren't, have lethal hits. Why would I care about reducing their toughness if all my 6s to hit auto wound and I'm just going for volume over quality? Like, why would it matter? What I think they should do.
Do you think that's 2 different people writing 2 different parts of the index?
No,
in different offices.
Well, there are 100% different people writing different indexes and then not play testing them against each other, as we've seen with 9th edition, where 2 sets of codexes came out with 2 different sets of power level, and we've seen again here where there's very clearly the haves and the have-nots. But this was just written, unfortunately, there's no other way of saying it, poorly. It's not the power level that's bad, which it is. It's that the rules are anti-synergistic and it feels bad to use your army rule because it does fuck all. What I think they could have done if they wanted to have like a growing contagion or a keeping in theme with the Nurgle's Rot, which I don't actually think is a particularly interesting mechanic. It doesn't feel super Death Guardy to me. I think of them as being more tough. Instead of being like everything around me withers and dies. Like, sure, in the fluff, but just make them harder to kill.
Yeah.
I would like to see the Contagion, if they keep it, minus movement. So they're a really slow army. It's really hard for them to catch you, but my God, once they get close, you are not getting away. You know, you can rationalize it in the same way. Your armor joints rust, so you can't move quickly. You could like -2 movement, half advance rolls, half charge rolls. I don't know. I haven't put a huge amount of thought into it, but something to do with movement, so that once the slow, grindy army is there, you're playing their game, and that's sort of the reward. So it's not that they are slow and that's a downside; it's that they're slow and that's an army playstyle choice, and you've got something to play around.
And if they had some sort of mechanic around infecting objective markers so that it spreads from those, it then means that they can defend them, and then.
But it doesn't matter.
No, but if it worked in that way, then actually,
yeah,
because then you'd be defending it, and they'd be slower trying to get to you, and you'd get to defend it.
Yeah,
and then charge into them.
Yeah, no, I like it.
That good combat that everyone has, right?
Also, sidebar, miniature rant. I'll make it 30 seconds. Why the fuck do Chaos have to pay more for the strats that the loyalists get? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, you've taken a group of players who have felt traditionally disenfranchised
since 5th edition,
and they're not wrong. Chaos have got less stuff and have got worse stuff. Last year was the year of Chaos, and they got some really cool books. And, you know, it was good. There was a lot of stuff in there that was good. But, like, reprinting the 8th edition Chaos book without making Chaos Space Marines 2 wounds, not even putting the FAQ fixes in and calling it a new book, because all you did was put in the data sheets from that box set that you printed with the Venom Crawler. And, like, that's...
Shadow Spear.
Can you imagine if they did that and for Space Marines, the outcry that people have, but it's just like, oh, it's a thing for Chaos. Oh, the Chaos players are complaining again. Who cares? I'm not even a Chaos player. Like, I mostly play Xenos at this point. This isn't Chaos player gets angry at shouts at clouds. It's it's so dumb.
I think you could be quite reasonable because they gave you firing deck on all your rhinos eventually.
Like I say, I don't have a Chaos Space Marine, so it's not something that affects me personally. But why the fuck are they playing 2 CP for Realm of Contempt? Like, what's up with that? Anyone got an answer for that?
I never tend to pay for it anymore.
No. Why would you? At 2 CP, it's incredibly overcosted.
And your Chaos are probably better than Space Marines at the moment.
Yeah, but like that's Dark Angels are probably better than Chaos Space Marines. Dark Angels in the Gladius Task Force are probably
correct.
Yeah, they're really good. They are really good. I see the look you're giving me. You'll play against them at some point. Hopefully,
yeah, but I'm just thinking about tournaments and how Chaos are doing quite well and how Dark Angels are not.
I think Dark Angels are doing fine. I haven't been keeping up on the specific stats.
Their stats aren't great, but I think that's also because everything's been pushed down still to.
Yeah, and also the people
deal
who
with
play
Elder.
Dark Angels might be playing other things.
Or playing them badly.
we did pick up a lot of Dark Angels players at the end of 9th edition because they became a very simple to play army. So maybe that's something to do with it. But, yeah, cool. Anyone got anything to add there for Chaos in general or for Death Guard?
I mean, there are certain builds of Chaos that are actually really potent. You have been seeing them do quite well in events. So I don't think they'll get touched because I think they're in that middle bracket of doing okay. But I wouldn't surprise me if they were one of the armies that did start to creep up towards the higher end of the tiers after this most recent update.
Yeah, the amount of shooting output they can put out is actually kind of worrying. But
terrifying.
If we see the change to non-line of sight shooting that I think we're all assuming is going to come in, where it goes back to 9th edition, so it's -1 ballistic skill, -1 AP, instead of -1 to hit, and you get cover. At that point, I think the obliterators are a lot less scary, because the best way to play them at the moment is to bring them in, cut an angle, kill something, then next turn, like, not get shot back because you've cut a nice angle. Next turn, shoot from behind cover, and get 2 shooting phases without being killed. Is a really good way to play them at the moment, or just make them Nurgle so they can't be shot. But if the non-line of sight nerf makes that less efficient, maybe that makes them a little bit less of a problem. It's hard to say. Cool. Well, moving on. So, questions. If you have got any questions, do chuck those in the chat. We will get to them. Probably got another 10-15 minutes or so, so get them in now, and we will go through for you. In the Discord, we've got a question from Ultimate Funk. Why isn't anyone talking about orcs in 10th? We have just talked about orcs in 10th. I don't think we need to rehash there. I think we've pretty much gone through all of that. And my God, there is a lot of talk about orcs in 10th. People talking about killer cans. Ultimate Funk, sorry, Tom, Ed, Chris, or whoever is reading this. Ultimate Funk, you are forgiven. It's not your fault. It's everyone else who responded to you.
Including me. Hello. It's me.
I'm seeing Tom in there. Tom's not here to defend himself, so I'm just going to say it's his fault. Lovely stuff. And Galmara says, what is your 40k pet peeve? Something that people say or do that just sets you off.
Okay, right. So I've experienced this a lot having played Harlequins in Arda. It's when they rock up to the table and they go, oh, well, I know I can't win this game. I've heard that so many times, and it just really annoys me. And I think I've probably moaned about it on this podcast before, actually. But first of all, you're going in with a negative attitude. So as soon as you go in with a defeatist attitude, you're not going to be thinking about how you can win this game. Because you can absolutely win this game. I know, because I've lost using the good army enough times to know that you can definitely lose that game. But also, it just immediately takes away any sort of well done you if you win this game. You're only going to win because your army is too good and there is nothing I can do about it. And if you somehow manage to lose, it's because you're a mong and you don't know what you're doing. And that's basically what they're walking up to the table and saying. and it just shapes the entire game and approach. And I go out of my way when I've played like weaker armies, and I go into the strong armies. I make sure I don't ever kind of like approach it in that way. I go in with the mindset of right, I'm going to make this game as close as I can. I'm going to try and win this game, and I'm not going to take away any sort of credit for the win for the opponent, because I know how it feels like when that's taken away. And obviously, with Harlequins, they were really strong. I never played them in the 9 Void Weaver days, but I played them when they were good. And I certainly had people go, oh, well, I know how this game goes. And but even with like the Eldar, like the lists I've been playing, yeah, I've got the Wraith Knight, but they also have a lot more mission playing stuff. And at the end of the game, they're like, "Oh, I didn't get as blown away as I thought I would." I'm like, "Yeah, 'cause that's not the style of player I am. I'm not a Manny Chima go and blow you away, or in the scene be in your face. I play it a bit differently. So no, the games will generally be close, and you will be in the game a bit more. And let's just enjoy the game as best as possible. But yeah, it's when they just come in straight away before you've even introduced yourself. Oh yeah, great, can't believe I've got Elder again. And I fully get it. I'm sure everyone's been bummed by Elder at some point. Everyone's been bummed by all the top armies at some point. And yeah, I get it. It sucks. But when they rock up to the table and they just have that immediate attitude of this is an unwinnable game, it just completely changes the dynamic. So
I had an experience like that back in 8th edition. It was at Goonhammer in October of 2020. And I was playing Orc Buggies, and it was an unpleasant list to play. Oh, there we go. Didn't play you. Didn't know who you were at that point. And it was the last game of the event. I was 3-2 going into this round. I'd had some great games. I'd had some good time. I played against Jay, Mohawk Minis, and my other loss was against David Gaylord. So, like, I was feeling good about how it was going. I was like, I've lost to 2 really good players. I'm having a blast. I've learned loads of things. This is a great time for me. And I came into my last game, and this guy walks up to the table, looks at my arm, and goes, I'm not playing this, and walks off. And genuinely walked off and went and talked to the Goonhammer staff. And 2 or 3 minutes later, he came back and just in a sulk. And I gave him like 5 minutes to work out his system because I was like, fuck it. It's the end of a weekend. Maybe he's just played like 2 really rough armies. But, he didn't sort himself out. So after 5 or 10 minutes of it, I did just have to say, like, look, are you going to sort yourself out? Because this is really unpleasant to play against. It's not on. At which point he suitably chastised, did, start having a bit more of a game. We had a bit of a laugh, but my God, it felt so good to fucking smash him. It's one of the very few games that I have relished in crushing someone. Normally, I'm just like, I've had a great time playing you. Obviously, I'm happy to have beaten you, or that was a close game where I feel like I did everything I could have done. This was great. Had a good time. Good luck in your next game. This time I was like, yes, your tears fuel me. But yeah, fuck that guy. If you see this and you remember that experience and you go, oh, he's talking about me, fuck you. Have a look in the mirror. Specifically you, have a look in the mirror and think about what you're doing, and just be a nicer person to play against. Have a better experience for everyone. And that's a bit petty for me to say, but
it's out there now.
Yeah. I don't regret it. Like, just always try to be like the best opponent you can be. For your opponent. Yeah. Cool. So Chris has had his rant about people having a whinge at a table. You got anything, Scriver?
Mine's kind of adjacent to both, actually. It's people being a bit sourced when they come to a tournament. Like, I don't mind it when I'm having a pickup game with a mate, but the minute you turn up at table and it's round 3 of a big 100-player GT that you spent a couple £100 to get to, hotels, all this stuff, and the person can barely stand up, I'm just like, no. Like, even if they can play the game that drunk, I find it really unpleasant personally, because the social contract is we're meant to be having a game, but if you're constantly having to go off to the toilet, you're getting another beer, you're knocking things over, it's really sloppy. That's not the game. That's not playing tournament level Warhammer. That's just, I'm down the club on a Friday night. Do that there. Don't do that in my place. It's just, not for me.
I'm enjoying this because Dave Murdoch from our team loves to occasionally get absolutely smashed over the course of a Saturday and have like multiple. I think there was one time it might be a Nottingham GT where him and his opponent just were both off their face, and like the third
That's
game,
all right when you're both going like,
Yeah.
we're going to get
Because
smashed.
the social contract's there, right?
Yeah.
But
But-
when it's not,
I love how you went, I'm going to call out one of my team members. Dave Murdoch, first name, second name,
Second name.
does this thing. Like,
he likes
yeah.
things being put on his shoulder. That's all I'm saying.
yeah. Oh god, yeah, we'll move on from that one. Lovely stuff. Anyone who's watched this podcast for the 6 months or so knows exactly what I'm about to say, because I've said it before on podcasts. I'm going to say it again. If I'm playing a game, do not come and stand next to me or next to my table. You can stand at a respectable distance and you can watch. I don't mind. You can interact with me briefly. You can say hi. You can, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or what have you. But like, don't try and talk to me. Don't try and talk to my opponent for a long time. I'm locked in for 2.5 to 3 hours with my opponent. We are playing a game. I don't give a shit that you finished in an hour and a half and now you're wandering around the hall with a fucking hot dog. It doesn't make a difference to me. I am thinking about the game. I'm going to try and win the game, and afterwards we can talk about it. Just like, give me space. Don't crowd me, and don't interrupt me. I come across as really unlikable on these streams. It's is that true for life?
You are also unlikable in real life. So
I tell you what, other things that I dislike. When I had a great showing at Davy Slam, and then in the award ceremony, Davy goes, "I didn't like you the first time I met you." I was like, "What? This is news to me." That cut me a little bit because it's not the first time someone said it to me. It's only the second time, but it makes you go, "Fuck it, is there something wrong with me?"
Is this you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the other people.
No, well, anyone who's seen The Simpsons has known. No, I'm not wrong. It's the children who are wrong. So it's fine. It's someone else's problem, but it's your fucking problem. Lovely stuff. Any other questions there? In chat, Illy Wazzle says new codexes are coming out. How fast can Ed go through them on coffee? I did manage to get it down to under 2 hours per stream for the indexes, so I don't know when they come out. Maybe I'll have to do some sort of blockbuster if I can get PDFs of them, something along those lines. And Just Make Stuff says tracking details in armies that aren't what you see is what you get can be really challenging. He gives some examples like which units have marks of chaos, which character has specific enhancements, which unit was it that gave a temporary invuln. How do you keep track of these things? What can you do to help your opponents with greater transparency on how you play the game?
I mean, I constantly ask my opponent which unit has got. So when I'm coming up with my plan of what I'm going to do in my turn, it would just be which army's got the invuln, which army's got the mark of Nurgle kind of thing, like the key information for me, which is relevant at that time. I keep asking, like when I remember in ninth, like playing into Dakari and being like, cool, there's a lot of boats there and there's things in those boats I have no idea. And even if they put the models and they had the color coordinated, and to them it was abundantly clear in the same way that when I played the Harlequins, I was always very self-aware of what was in my boats, but I'm sure my opponent wasn't. But as the attacking player, all I can really do is just keep asking and asking and asking. Like the current thing is for me is Necrons, playing into Necrons. So what defensive buffs do these have? Like over and over, probably like 3 or 4 times in a shooting phase or movement phase, just because I just keep forgetting, but just keep asking. Like, it just, there isn't this contract of, oh, you need to have a Nurgle shoulder pad if you're going to have and even if you did, you wouldn't notice. And like in terms of like WYSIWYG and the weapons and stuff, like it's just most of the weapons we don't recognize, do we? Especially for the lesser factions. So it's just kind of just constantly talking and communicating with your opponent is my approach to it anyway.
I disagree on the WYSIWYG on the weapons. I think if you're running weapons, you should be running the right weapons. Like, it's not that hard.
Like my Harlequins, like they had a mixture of things, and I tried to make it as close as possible, but the reality was it didn't really actually matter.
Well, I don't know. It's like, because then when you recognize the army, it's then confusing for you because you look at it and go, oh, you've got this, and then they don't have it. I would much rather my opponents have the correct correct weapons, and I always try to bring the correct weapons myself. But in general, no, I think that's absolutely fair. It's very difficult. If you can run things that have Nurgle painted, that have the mark of Nurgle, that's cool. If you can bring little tokens or little cards that say the buffs on them, that's fantastic. You don't have to do it, but if you want to be a considerate opponent and go that extra step, that's really, really good, really cool. It's the sort of thing that if you can do, I'm not going to say you should do, but if you can do it, it's fantastic. And it's just a nicer experience for both people. But yeah, otherwise, I am also going to ask you what this has 4 times. And I'm a little bit younger than Chris, so my memory's a little bit better. So I might not say, what buffs has that got? I might just say, this has got that buff. Or is there anything else you can put in it? But it's functionally the same thing. How about you, Scrivo?
Very much the same. But I will often I found sort of, I think for the LGT last year, I had 2 trucks. One was yellow, one was red. So I wrote on my sheet the truck that had the squig high tiles. I went, the red truck is this one, just to highlight it. And I did it as a way for me to remember as well that it was the red one goes faster.
Yeah.
And so I often, in 9th edition, I don't do it now because I've got my little cards. I had an A4 sheet that had all my stats. It had all the little mini rules, but it also stated if there was, say, 2 characters that were the same model, and I'd painted some difference on the 2, like one had a pink orb, one had a purple orb, it's a purple orb, just so that it was there written, so there wasn't this situation where my opponent could go, at the beginning of the game you said this, and I go, no, I said it was the other way around, because it suits me now. So there wasn't opportunity for the kind of it being dubious.
That's a good, interesting one. Because I remember playing in the glorious AdMech days of all of the planes. I played Manny in a final where I had 4 planes and he had 6. And I got to go first. And there's this really cool photo of half the board just had 10 planes in it. And what Manny had done was his Stratoraptors and his bombers were basically the same. The only difference was the airbrush colour. So one was red and one was yellow. So I went first. I was like, right, got to kill the Stratoraptors. So blapped away into all the, let's say, red ones. And then it turned out I'd got it wrong. And I just killed all his bombers instead. And it was that he told me early on. And then I just forgot it. And now with more experience, I would be like, can you just remind me? Because actually colours to us as players, we've used them over and over and over. We've got them logged in, what each colour means. But to our opponent, it doesn't necessarily make sense at all.
I've definitely been on the receiving end multiple times of killing something and going, cool, that's, that mentally filed away in my head. And then a turn later, my opponent uses something that I didn't think they could do, like an upgrade. But I think some of those times I've probably just misremembered. But I'm generally pretty on the ball about remembering where buffs are, because that's a big part of like shooting efficiency, and I love playing shooting lists. So you've got to keep track of which things you want to kill first. So you map it out in your turns. I think it's probably the most cheating that's happened against me is people doing that, because it's such a hard one to catch, that unless you specifically say it as you go in your turn, I'm going to shoot at this unit. Is this the unit that has the buff? Which is what I've started doing post, because it's just very frustrating to experience. But it's very easy for opponents to say, oh, no, it's the pink one that's got the buff. And like, I'm fairly certain that you said it was the other way around before, but what are we going to do now? Like, there's no way a judge can fix that. I'm like, I remember this differently. Cool. Yeah. Lovely stuff. Just Make Stuff also said, do you have any advice on good practices that you think more people should do? Let's wrap that up as our last question. Anything that you want to add on as a good practice for being a good opponent?
So I'd say crib sheets. Like when I had a little crib sheet where it had it all written there, and it had things like what the core stratagems I'd be using were, and which units it could work on, and keywords and stuff. Then they could just look at it in there, like when it's my turn, just they had something to refer to, so they didn't have to ask all the questions as well.
Sure. That makes sense.
I don't think it's necessarily as important when you get kind of further into some of the edition, depending on how complex things are. But at the moment, I don't feel it would be as necessary, but I don't think it could hurt if someone's never played the army, perhaps.
Sure. I will admit it's something that I've never have done and probably never will, because it's too much hassle. It's a great thing to do, and I think it's great that you do it. I do typically say at the start of the game, please just ask me the question again if you forget, because we all forget. Some of us more than others. Anything for you, old man?
For the just in general good practices, one thing I'm really working on at the moment is declaring intent and declaring measurements constantly. It's kind of like, right, this unit moves 10 and I'm going to be, and it's coming here. And then it'll be a 7-inch charge over there. Okay, cool, excellent. And like just having that constant thing. And I think too often in games, I certainly I do things. I'm like, master plan, and then they're like, oh, well, I can do this. I'm like, oh, man, you're not supposed to, and I've got it slightly wrong, and now you managed to get through that gap, or now it becomes a conversation. The classic thing when we played into Wales, there was this. I put these 2 units to block off a disembark, and I then had a unit behind them, safe. Oh, so I thought. Then he went to disembark through that gap, and I was like, "Oh no, you can't disembark through that gap." He was like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure I can," and got the tape measure out, and then immediately knocked the terrain. And then we were like, "Well, now we can't." And now it's just, but all I had to do in the previous turn was go, and I'm going to
Clarify.
file in and consolidate into these 2 places so that you can't get through this gap. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I think I need to do that more rather than going for you fell for my plan, and then sometimes it doesn't actually work. So that's a big push for me. Is really clear because I know being on the receiving end of it when an opponent is like right, and this goes 10, and this will be a blah blah charge. That makes me feel like they're definitely being really open and honest and that sort of thing, rather than just going. Poof, poof, the models are flying around everywhere, and you're like, I assume you're measuring correctly. But when I know that they're clearly being accurate and careful in front of me, that means that I'm going to be a lot more relaxed and not like staring over them, like being like, stop moving an extra 3 inches.
I find that helps me for almost remembering things because I'm saying it like, and I'm doing this because of this. It means that later in the turn, I've got that kind of almost a mental note of it.
And also, if you said it, and this unit, I guess, will do cleanse, and then you come back, and then when you go, oh shit, I forgot to do cleanse, the opponent goes, you said you were going to do it, weren't you? Right? And that's kind of how it goes.
The funny thing is, it's an equalizer. So against good players, it makes you more likely to win because you agree between you that the thing you're doing works. Against worse players, it lets them understand how you're trying to play the game in a way that they might not have, which is fine because you should just beat them anyway. But like it is funny because I'll say loads of stuff at a table and I'll realize that like my opponent does something in response. I'm like, you would have never thought to do that if you hadn't, because like you're playing against an army that you don't know well or what have you. Not saying that I'm just like some sort of fucking 4D chessman. But I'm okay with that. Like I would rather I at this point I'm just like, it feels like going to the events is practice for events, so it doesn't really matter how you do as long as you feel like you've done well. So I'd always rather play against the highest caliber opponent I can, and if that's someone who's not super experienced, then me saying this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it, so that they understand and they can make their own game plan, I'd rather have that. And the 1 in like 50 times it backfires on you, fuck it, it's what it is. You feel better about it.
It was still a more enjoyable game for you overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that is it. Keep watching this space. Have a lovely evening. You're all fantastic people. Hugs and kisses.
Bye.